Here we have a mosaic dataset containing roughly 1,000 scenes of 4-band planet imagery over Kokorin, California. This dataset contains blue, green, red, and near-infrared bands in that order. And this data is shown here in natural color or RGB band combination, but we can quickly and easily change these bands to show other things. So if we select the data layer in our contents pane here on the left, the Mosaic Layer Data tabs appear at the top of the ArcGIS Pro window. In the Mosaic Layer Data tab, we can select the different processing templates and change how the data is actually rendered. So let's select the color infrared processing template and see what happens. Now our data is shown with a color infrared band combination, and this has changed and re-rendered the data on the fly. So we can also use processing templates to show things that include more involved calculations like the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, or NDVI. So when we select this NDVI colorized template, ArcGIS Pro is doing all the processing and the calculations on the fly behind the scenes using the display extent and the resolution that it's displayed at. And this means we can change how we're viewing our data very quickly and very easily. So let's change our processing template to the default none. And this is just using bands 1, 2, and 3. So blue, green, and red. And we'll zoom into our area of interest. Here we want to look at how the vegetation changed in this location from March to August. Rather than working with the whole mosaic dataset, we can explore the individual raster items that are included in the collection, and then we can pull out and work with only the ones that we're interested in. So let's select the Explore Raster Items tool up in our Mosaic Layer Data tab. The Explore Raster Items tool allows you to search your entire collection, or you can just search a subset of it. So in this case, we're just going to search in the display extent, so just the area that's in our display window. We can also filter the items by the attribute. So you can use all kinds of different things here. In this case, we're going to use the object ID. So you can change the display of your results to show different attributes, and you can also display thumbnails. As we scroll through our results here, you can see select which images you want to use. So in this case, I want to use image 17, and I want to use image 32. Now that I've selected the items I want to work with, I can go right up here and add them to my map. Let's turn off our mosaic dataset layer so we can see just the scenes that we're working with. Now that we have our individual scenes, I want to explore how the vegetation changed from March to August. We'll start by applying an NDVI raster function to each of these scenes, so that Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. Raster functions are incredibly powerful tools that process your data on the fly, and they create temporary files for the output, rather than taking up very valuable storage space on your computer. So because of this, they're extremely useful, especially when you're experimenting with different processes or settings. Rather than taking up lots of time to run or using up valuable space on your computer, you can iterate until you find the settings and the processing steps that you like, and then save the final output. So here, to open our raster functions pane, we'll go up to the Imagery tab and select Raster Functions. You can see in the Raster Functions pane on the right side of the window here that there are a lot of options to choose from. There are actually over 140 raster functions that Esri has curated, and you can also chain them together or create your own Python raster functions. So you're really only limited by your imagination. So today we're going to use the NDVI colorized raster function and apply that to each of our scenes in this area. So we will select our time 1 raster from March. The visible band is band 3 and the infrared band is band 4. And I can select what type of colorizing I want and click Create New Layer. So now I have my NDVI for this one scene, but I also need to apply it to my other scene. So let's go back and do our NDVI colorized on our other scene. Now that we have our NDVI results, we can swipe between the two different layers to compare them. But we can also go one step further and calculate the difference in NDVI using another raster function, the calculator. So the expression we're going to use is T1 minus T2. I'll set my T1 and set my T2 and click Create New Layer. So it's now doing all of this calculation on the fly, on demand, and creating that output into a temporary file. So here's our calculated difference in NDVI from March to April. But let's say this black and white image isn't really the final result that we're looking for, and we want to create a colorful final result that will show vegetation change. We can do this using another raster function, the composite bands function. So here I'm combining the NDVI from March, the NDVI from August, and the calculated difference between the two. And now we have our final vegetation difference image. So areas that are green had an increase in vegetation from March to August, and areas that are pink had a decrease in vegetation. But maybe this is a process that you or one of your colleagues has to do regularly, and you don't want to keep having to do all of these steps over and over. You can actually save this processing chain as your own custom raster function. So if we go to our final vegetation difference layer and we right-click, we can go to Save Function Chain. And this shows us all the steps we took to get to this point, and we can save the sequence of steps to use later. So we'll go up here to Save As. Here we'll give our new custom raster function a name. And a description. We can select where the custom function will be saved. So if you choose Project, it will only appear in this project. If you select the custom option, it will always appear in your custom raster function menu, no matter which project you're working on. And you can also select a subcategory if you have subcategories in your custom raster function menu. So we'll save our new custom raster function. So once you save your custom raster function, it will appear over in your custom raster functions menu. Now, let's say we're starting all over with these scenes freshly added to our map. So I'll turn off all of these other processed layers here. So now I have these unanalyzed scenes for March and April, and I want to use my newly saved custom raster function to create that vegetation difference layer rather than going through all those steps individually. So I can select that vegetation difference custom raster function, input my time 1 and my time 2 data sets, and click Create New Layer. This raster function is now doing all of those calculations that I showed you before on the fly without me having to go in and do each step manually. And you can also share your custom raster functions out with your organization through ArcGIS Online or your portal so your colleagues can use them too. And here we have our final vegetation difference calculated layer using our custom raster function.